Hey guys, Youngblood with you, and we're going to talk about the versus matchup between the 325 and the Avenger that I proposed the other day. Now, before we get into this, I should apologize for not specifying that we were talking about stock loadouts, but it is something I'll try and, clarify a little bit better for some of the future matchups. We're kind of learning together how this series is going to go. But basically, I intended stock loadouts for the purpose of this video, but I'm sure that some of these other videos are going to be a little bit more flexible as far as how we're actually going to propose the questions. The problem that we might run into it with this is that the weapons, there's so many more weapons being added to the game, and Voyager Direct continues to expand, and with the new Arena Commander bucks, there's a whole lot of, situations, and it may get kind of weird or hard to actually balance things out a little bit, but I'll try and find a way to, kind of strike that middle ground. Either way, sorry for the confusion, and let's go ahead and get right down to it. I think what we see with these two different ships is two significantly different stock loadouts, but I think that kind of falls in line with what the purpose of each ship actually is. The Avenger, which is primarily a cop car or a bounty hunting type ship, isn't designed with dealing death in mind. The sucker punches on the wings are the single biggest downfall of the ship overall, and what we called in this versus matchup a fight to the death. The weapons are designed to disable, so they're not going to be dealing large amounts of damage. Now, they do a pretty good job on shields, but they've got a slow rate of fire and a painfully slow projectile velocity. So basically, when you're trying to land shots with the sucker punches, especially against a fairly nimble target, you're going to have a bad time. Now it's going to be interesting to see the more damage states that we get in the game and how much of an impact the disabling weapons like these will have on ship systems, but it doesn't feel like that's a significant advantage, at least at the moment right now. Now, what the Avenger Loadout has going for it is good sustained fire option in the Tiger Strike. The problem with this, though, is that the gun is just really kind of fairly average in its current iteration. The amount of damage that it can unleash is good, but you really need to be able to maintain your firing line and lane the majority of your shots for it to really be effective. Now, in this fight, with no obstacles and just one-on-one, the chances of that 325 just sitting still for that Tiger Strike to really be totally effective, I think are pretty slim to none. Especially if we're considering equal playing skill, or equal player skill. Now, the nose gun can puncture through shields and do some damage, but it's not a really significant enough advantage to really matter. So, while the Avenger's primary downfall, at least in my mind, is its wing weapons, the 325's ace in the hole is its wing weapons. The Omni-Sky 6s are possibly the most powerful weapons that we have in the game right now. And I don't know if you've seen this video, but there's some dude that flies around with a cutlass that has like 6 of them on there, and holy crap, it's terrifying. Either way, there's some drawbacks to the Omni-Skies. They're not perfect, namely with convergence and power requirements. Now, they run through their juice fairly quickly, so you can't really just lay down the trigger and, spam them. And with these being fixed weapons on the very tips of your wings, you're going to have some convergence issues, which means that landing both of your shots at the same time can be a little bit challenging, especially depending on the range that you're engaging at. Either way, the weapons themselves are outstanding. They do so much damage to shields that they feel like they just melt right off. And once you get through the shields, they do a great deal of damage to the hull as well. And then we've got the nose gun, the Sledge Mass Driver, and basically it just chunks big old hunks of metal at the target, and it does a fairly decent amount of damage. Now, it's not going to provide that same sustained damage over time that something like the Tiger Strike will, but the whole 325 weapon loadout rewards accuracy. One other aspect that's important to note is that the Omni-Skies perform very well at longer ranges too, meaning that the 325 is going to be able to put more damage on that target before the Avenger can. So by the time the fight gets to closer ranges, the 325 is already at an advantage. Now, the one scenario where I can see the Avenger actually winning is based on equal skill. If both pilots are equally terrible, then the nose gun on the Avenger could be the difference maker. It's probably the most forgiving weapon on either of the ships, and if accuracy is an all-time low, then being able to actually land some shots occasionally may end up giving that Avenger pilot the ability to win. However, I think once the skill level even gets past an absolute minimum, and even just reaches a level of like pretty bad, then I think the 325 is going to take this battle every time. Now, there's other factors in this that we can consider too, but I think what we've really covered so far are the real difference makers. For example, the Avenger has a fairly low signature compared to the 325, but without debris or asteroids to help kind of break up that line of sight, that's not really going to be much of a benefit. The 325 also has significantly more powerful missiles. Though they do travel, fairly slow, the missiles are relatively easy to avoid still. So I'm not giving that a huge advantage, though there are situations where you can use them, and they're extremely effective right now. And I guess if we want to talk about, really super low skill levels again, then perhaps the better missiles on the 325 provide a better advantage. And I should say that regardless of skill, just because the better missile is better. But higher skilled pilots are going to be able to flare, and that's pretty much going to kind of void out that benefit, really. And there's going to be plenty of flares to get through the 4 missiles that both of these ships are actually carrying. It's not a non-factor, but it's pretty close when we're talking about this particular engagement. Other things to look at would be things like durability, speed, and maneuverability. From flying both of these, the Avenger feels like it's more durable than the 300 series, but really not by a whole lot. The Avenger also kind of was, insanely maneuverable for a while, but once it had its mass corrected in the game, it lost a lot of that benefit as well. Finally, with speed, they're identical. They both go 220 meters per second. Now, if we're going to be basing this on descriptions alone, the Avenger should be faster than the 325, and the 325 should be more maneuverable than the Avenger. But that's not really the case right now, at least with speed. Now, the maneuverability feels about the same with both of them, at least to a point where no one's going to really have an easy time getting behind the other one. So I think I'm kind of echoing a lot of the kind of sentiments that the majority of you had, and that was saying that the 325 would win this fight, and I agree with that. I think this fight, really started and ended with the stock wing weapons. And there wasn't enough else on the Avenger to make up for the sucker punches, just total inadequacy in killing. Now, this result may change over time as we see adjustments made to the ships, but for now I feel pretty confident in my choice. A couple shoutouts to some people who gave some great responses, and there were a lot, but just to name a few. Red Eye Channel, and I really kind of seem to be on the same page, especially with the goal of this being a fight to the death, and the sucker punches not supporting that end goal. Chitect gave some solid reasoning, kind of including a armor modifier in favor of the 325, and even looked forward to kind of talking about potential changes to the Avenger, including upgrades that might kind of help it out in the long run. And then Wright 1994 gave some solid, reasoning, especially talking about like IR signatures and tactics that both would use, and really kind of looked at the big picture overall. There was a lot more, but it would take forever for me to give everybody shout-outs, so thank you for everybody that actually contributed in the discussion. Now, I don't want everyone to hear this and go run off and melt your Avengers, because I still feel really, really confident in recommending the ship to really anybody. We have the options to replace those sucker punches, and they may get better over time anyways. In addition, the Avenger is still way more versatile than the 325 is, and can serve a whole lot more roles in the persistent universe. Either way, that's kind of how we're going to wrap this up. The 325 wins this engagement, at least in my mind. So with that being said, stay tuned for an upcoming video with our next matchup. If you disagree with me or just have suggestions for the next one, put it in the comments. Otherwise, stay tuned for a whole lot more. Have yourselves a wonderful day, and take care.